presentation. So yeah, welcome everyone. Thank you again for coming. My name is Erica Diaz. I'm with Community Water Center. My position at Community Water Center is a community solutions advocate. So part of what I do is I outreach with communities and advocate for safe, clean, and affordable drinking water solutions here in the Central Valley. And I'll pass it over to my colleague Brian to also do some.
Yeah. Hi folks, my name is Brian Osorio. I am also a community solutions advocate. Like Erica, we are tasked with the community engagement side of things for state programs, but also local programs. We both help in technical assistance projects in East Orosi, West Goshen, getting immersed in the CV salts process, getting more familiar with the Sigma process as well, just making sure residents' voices are heard in the relevant meetings, and trying to get people safe, clean, and affordable drinking water.
Cool. Yeah, so like I said, who are we, right? So we are Community Water Center, and part of our mission is to, so our core value is that we believe that human water is a right and not a privilege, right? So we kind of do that through, well, we see this mission through a couple of different areas. So we do that through policy, we do that through advocacy, and we also do it through a wide range of like educational aspects like we're doing right now, and also we do that through technical assistance projects as well. So we have our hands in a lot of different areas of work, but one of the main reasons that we started was our founders, Susana and Laurel, were actually doing work in the community of East Orosi. Yeah, so East Orosi, which is a community that's I think about a mile away from the actual community of Orosi, and they found that there was a lot of nitrate in their water, which we'll describe what nitrate is later, but it's a contaminant that's found in the water, right? So that made the water undrinkable, because nitrate can cause lots of different effects in the water, or to someone who drinks it, right? Essentially they started organizing the community around there to advocate for, clean, safe, and affordable drinking water. And they found out that case was very familiar in lots of the different surrounding communities, like we see here, like Seville, Tullyville, which is not even that far away from here, from Farmersville, right? So that's kind of where our story started, right? And now we have a growing base of folks in different communities that are advocating for clean water. But yeah, that's kind of a little bit of our story. And one of the main issues that we deal with, right, is that we deal with groundwater, and not necessarily surface water, which is two different things, right? So what groundwater is groundwater that's literally beneath our feet, right? So it's water that's stored in the soil, right? And it's usually through, like, whenever like it rains, let's say like we had these recent storms, that water trickles down into the soil, right? And it's stored there. So these things right here are called aquifers, right? And yeah, essentially what groundwater is, it's literally water that's stored beneath our feet. So that's the area that we work in. We don't necessarily work on surface water, which is like streams, rivers, canals, and things like that. We don't necessarily work in that. So the main area that we work in is in groundwater. And we essentially fight to like protect it, right? And make sure that it's clean, safe, and affordable to folks to drink. And now I'll pass it over to Brian.
Not too close. So we'll be talking about some of the resources for nitrate contamination, but the presentation today, when we're talking about groundwater contamination, is related to nitrates. So nitrates are often stigmatized as very dangerous, and they can be at high concentrations. However, it's important to understand that nitrates are naturally occurring. It is only when there is a high concentration in water that it becomes dangerous to infants and to adults over long use of time. But nitrates are essentially a compound that is mixed with oxygen and nitrogen. Nitrogen is good for our bodies, nitrogen is good for plants, and when it breaks down in the soil, that's where it can get tricky. And this is where when you have this breakdown of nitrates in the soil, and as the water, Erica was referencing earlier, as the rainwater pours down and permeates into the soil, into the water table, into the aquifers, and then if there's domestic wells nearby that are pulling from the aquifers, that's where it can be risky to some of the households that depend on groundwater. But again, nitrates as a fundamental concept is just nitrogen and oxygen. And it is found in fertilizer, but also I'll get into an image. Nitrates are found in synthetic nitrogen fertilizer. They're found in dairy waste. They're found in the leakage of septic tanks and also of animal manure. And again, these are different ways in which nitrates can be found permeating into the soil and into the water. And so there's no singular source of nitrates, but it is sporadic and spread throughout the Central Valley, which is why we're talking about nitrates here in Farmersville, or we're talking about across Tulare County, because there is nitrate contamination very, very prevalent in the Central Valley, given that we depend on groundwater so much. And so we just wanted to provide an example. This is an image where a person is spraying a synthetic nitrogen fertilizer, and this is necessary for the development of crops under intense agricultural practices, or even just a simple growth of a crop. But again, the thing that we want to highlight is when this is done at a higher rate than normal, than what can be processed by the plant or crops or even the soil, it starts making its way into the water. And so that's the process. And so earlier we mentioned East Sarosi. So I believe the latest test results when examining for nitrates in East Sarosi, it came out about 7 times the MCL. The MCL is the maximum contaminant level by the Environmental Protection Agency, which is 10 milligrams per liter. And so when East Sarosi is pumping groundwater that's contaminated with nitrates, this is essentially the simplified version. Of course, one thing that we want to talk about in the next slide or two is that East Sarosi is a public water system. A public water system is defined as 15 or more connections. And this is just one example of a public water system getting its contaminated water from the water table. And so, very quickly, some of the questions that we come across when trying to explain folks about resources for nitrate contamination is whether you depend on a public water system or if you're on a private domestic well. Again, if you're on a public water system, it's usually defined as having 15 or more connections, depending on a singular well. Usually, one of the biggest observations of a private domestic well is you don't receive a water bill because you are extracting water from your own well. The bill you may have is whether you are paying off a loan to have that well drilled, which is sometimes a scenario for folks across Tulare County because of having experienced a dry well. And so the one resource we want to talk about for nitrate contamination is there are management zones which started implementing this interim solution of free well testing and free bottled water if your well test comes above 10 milligrams per liter, which is a resource that we want to provide here. And we have a representative from Korea Water Foundation as well who dropped off their literature. We're being recorded, so just making note of that. And so Korea Water Foundation is one of 3 management zones that intersect in Tulare County. We have Kings Water Alliance at the most northern part of Tulare County. Then we have Korea Water Foundation, and then we have Tule Basin Management Zone. And these management zones are currently doing efforts across Tulare County as well as in other areas to make sure that people have access to a free well test if they sign up through an intake form, and having free bottled water every 2 weeks if there is nitrate contamination over the maximum contaminant level. But again, this is just one of the resources available for nitrate contamination. I think that's it for my end. Yeah.
And then also, just another resource that we did want to highlight is us as well. So like, let's say folks are having, they may not know, like, let's say what management zone they belong to. They can always contact us and we can like refer them out or just like help folks navigate those resources as well. So I also just wanted to put that out there as well. So that's for the nitrate portion, right? And for the next part of the presentation, we are going to be talking about drought, right? But a question I did want to ask folks is if we think drought affects contamination, like let's say if we have like if someone has like a domestic well, do we think that the drought may affect the contamination in any way? Like if their well is contaminated? And you can say yes or no, or maybe I don't know. Well, just to show, well, we're showing an example right now, but the answer is yes, right? And I think Brian can hopefully help me out with a little bit of the sciencey explanation. But the answer is yes, because essentially when there's less water, right? So let me go back to this image right here. So like when there is less, So if there's less water that's able to be pumped, essentially that nitrate, is the word concentrates? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it concentrates at the bottom, right? So essentially, it does affect it, right? It makes someone more susceptible to nitrate contamination or any other type of contaminant, like uranium or whatever they might have around in the soil, right? So the short answer is yes. And we kind of wanted to show that in a little bit of a soil demonstration, so I'll probably be putting it over here to the camera since we are recording this. So here we have two jars of soil. All right, one of them is just like regular like potting soil. It has like a bunch of nutrients in it, right? And then in the other one, we just picked up some soil off the side of the road, like near a field, which likely has lots of like fertilizer in it, and probably a higher concentration of nitrate. So we're gonna essentially pour water into these jars. So, and I just want y'all to like see the difference in the way the water absorbs it, right? So also just other observations that we see from this, right, is that this soil is a lot less like dark, right? It looks a little bit more dry, and this soil, it's a little bit darker, right? It has a lot more nutrients in it, and a lot more organic matter, which is like wood and all this kind of stuff. So I'm gonna pour water into it, and you're gonna see how differently they absorb. Shouldn't pour that much into it. Probably should have gotten more water, but it's okay. So essentially this is what's happening, right? We see that, and I'll put it closer here too, and I'll show it. So it's kind of hard to see, but the water here in the soil with more nutrients, or like the healthy soil, right? It absorbed it a lot more quickly, whereas the soil that we picked up off the side of a farm, it's just sitting at the top. And it's not necessarily absorbing the water, or absorbing it at a lot slower rate. And that matters, right? Because, here in the valley, we recently had all these storms, right? And they flooded a lot of different areas. And essentially that water is just like running off into different areas, or it's also like carrying off different contaminants into like the streams and stuff like that. So it's just really important to see how much the contamination and drought go hand in hand, right? And they really affect the ways our groundwater is able to be absorbed and able to restore the groundwater beneath our feet. So it's just a little soil demonstration, just to get, the minds. So real quick, we just really wanted to talk about drought here in the valley, right, in our side of the valley. So like I said, I mentioned that we recently had a lot of storms. So this data might look a lot different, but this was data from March 9th of this year, and it's just a map that shows the amount of dry wells in the state. So we can see that there's a really large concentration of dry wells here in the valley, right? Because and we'll talk about why that is in a little bit. And this is what groundwater levels looked like last year in around the state. So the darker it is here, that means there's less groundwater available, or the groundwater levels are really low. So we can see obviously here in the middle of the state, right, which is where we are, groundwater levels were really low. And this was in September of last year. Fast forward to February of this year, right, this is what the map looked like. So again, with the recent rain, this might also just look a lot different. And while they may have alleviated, while the recent storms may have alleviated the groundwater levels a little bit, it's not, they're not necessarily able to, I'm losing my train of thought, to end the drought, right? They might be able to help it with a little bit, but it's not going to necessarily be enough rain for, hundreds of years. Which is why it's important that, we're able to find different solutions to help restore our groundwater levels and things like that. So yeah, what causes drought, right? So a lot of different things cause drought in different parts of the world, right? But here in the Central Valley, we see that one of the main things is things like climate change, right? The different weather cycles or unpredictable weather cycles here in the valley make it really difficult for us to like expect rain and things like that, as well as restore the groundwater. And then another large part of drought here in the Central Valley is because of overpumping, right? By like ag wells such as like this. Sometimes ag wells will be pumping a lot more deeper than, let's say, someone's private little private domestic well. So it could so let me just actually, I think it's the next one. Yeah. So let's say, for example, right, this is like a well in someone's home, right? And let's say they live across the street from a farm, right? And it has a really big ag well, right? These big ag wells are usually a lot more like fancier, right? They're able to drill way deeper, and things like that. And what happens is that usually, like that water will start concentrating over here, and these smaller wells will go dry a lot faster. And sometimes, these ag wells will start pumping out sand and things like that because they're dry. So that's kind of like just a visual that we wanted to show why this matters, right? And part of the reason that we're here, right, is that because we want to work together to find a solution. Because while we still understand, like ag here in the Central Valley, it's important, right, because it grows our food. It's also causing, like issues here to our drinking water, right? So we want to find solutions together. But yeah, that's one of the main reasons that drought exists here in the valley. And for folks, in the room that might, or watching, right, that might be experiencing things like a dry well, there are resources that are able to help alleviate some of those issues, right? So one of the resources here in the Central Valley is self-help enterprises, and we did provide material right there for folks who might be interested. So let's say folks need to test their wells for contamination, they can call self-help to test their well, and if they do find contamination in the well, they'll be able to receive bottled water every 2 weeks. Or let's say if their well is dry, they can also call self-help to explain their issue with their dry well. And if they see if their well is dry, they'll also be connected to bottled water every 2 weeks. But also they'll be connected to hauled water, which comes in these really big tanks, and they'll also receive them. I think, is it every 2 weeks or every?
I think a month.
A month?
I'm not too sure.
Every month. We might have to confirm, but it's like a regular delivery that comes either bi-weekly or every month. And again, folks do have to apply for that. I forget the other resource, but yeah, they essentially they help with drought, right? And if folks do also again need help navigating those resources, or let's say someone may feel comfortable with us helping them, we're also a resource to help navigate those processes. Community Water Center and self-help do a lot of work together, so yeah, we're also able to help folks in that process as well.
I think maybe the other resource was if people want to drill a new well, they try to help with low interest grants or low interest loans.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain that?
So, yeah, as I mentioned earlier, in the case where there's dry wells and folks want to drill a new well, I believe Self-Help is one of the organizations that helps people, look at different well drillers in the valley, and then from there they choose which well driller they'd like to move forward with, and Self-Help would provide low interest loans to be able to pay for the new well. But yeah, I think that's the one
Yeah.
I'm missing.
Okay. Yeah. So those are the resources available. And yeah, I think that concludes our presentation.
Is there any questions that folks may have? I know it's a bit rushed, but yeah, happy to slow down and go back to certain topics.
Again, if there is no questions, that's